In today's video, we're going to be making a Stitch Loungefly bag in cake. So I love Stitch and I love the Loungefly bags. I also love gingerbread. So when I did see this bag online, I had to buy it. But before I start using it, I want to really make a cake version of it. So let's try and make it. I am worried about doing the details like the zip. We have done one of these bags before, a different Loungefly bag. So I'll put a link in the video so you guys can watch that one as well. Now, I think for this one, we're just going to do it so it lays down flat on a board. So let's cut a board to the right size. Last time I did it so it stood up, but I wanted to make it a little bit quicker, a little bit easier for myself this time. So I'm just getting all the measurements of the bag so we know how big to cut that card. If I do it laying down, it means I don't have to put the straps on as well. And from what I remember last time, they were the difficult bit to create. And I am thinking maybe for future ones, guys, should I do another Loungefly bag cake? But should we do it where it's wearable? I was thinking of maybe doing this and someone suggested it the other day. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Okay, so we're going to colour some buttercream green and I'm also going to do some red as well. I am using some ready-made cakes again now. I buy mine from Sweet Success and the other day I rang them and they very kindly offered to send me these cakes for this particular video for free. So a huge thank you to Sweet Success. I will put links below to their shop and where you can get the cakes from. So I've started with a square cake. I thought that was going to be the closest size-wise to my boards. I'm just going to use that offcut to cut a little bit for the top as well. Now I'm going to put a little bit of buttercream on my cake card and we're going to stick this on. Let's just get a bit of buttercream on there as well. So my first layer, or proper layer of buttercream, we're going to go in with some red. And of course you don't have to colour the buttercream, especially if you don't want to use like the bright food colours like what I have done. Okay, let's get our second layer on. It's very soft, the cake. Often I'll use the cake partially frozen or fully frozen when I'm carving it to a shape. It just makes it a bit easier to work with. But for this one, I haven't frozen it. It just arrived in the post as I was making this. So yeah, no time to freeze it. Green layer of buttercream and then our top layer of cake. So that should be about thick enough. And then I'm going to take another little rectangle and that's going to create the pocket that goes on the front of the bag. Now I'm just going to try and slope it a little bit here as the bag isn't completely straight and flat. Now it sticks out more, can you see at the very back, kind of dips in and then comes back out again as it comes to the front. I'll try and create that curve. I wouldn't say I get that exactly right, but you know, I tried. Now I'm going to cover the whole thing in ganache, which again I have kindly been sent by Sweet Success. Now I often do use their ganache anyway, guys. It makes life so much easier for me. It is a bit more expensive than making it yourself. But if you're stuck for time, it is sometimes worth sort of spending that little bit extra if it saves you the time. It depends. If you're lazy like me, it's great. So I'm going to cover the whole bag in this ganache. And I'm using a flexible smoother to just go around and get it as smooth as I can everywhere. Okay, so we're going to cover it in fondant. I'm using some Saracino pasta top, which again, I was very kindly sent for the Cake International project that I did back in November. And I had plenty left. So I have coloured this to like a gingerbread colour. And do you know the bag is actually scented as well? It's not an advert for the bag, honestly, this video. I just love the bag so much. Although it kind of is a very fake gingerbread smell is the bag, which I guess it's going to be, isn't it? Okay, so I'm rolled out the fondant and I'm going to cover the whole bag or as much of it as I can. It doesn't matter if it doesn't go all the way to the very back of the bag or our cake, because I'm going to cut it off where the zip goes. But I'm just pushing in an indentation everywhere, just using my Dresden tool. And this would be everywhere that the kind of seams on the bag would be, really. So I have got my bag next to me so I can use it for guidance for where I need to put all these lines. And I'll put links below to all the tools and everything that I've used in the video. I'll put them below in the description. Okay, so let's just remove a little piece where the top zip is going to go on that front pocket, because we'll need to replace that later with some ivory or white coloured fondant. Just using a little tool to squeeze that down there. And then I'm going to trim a bit off here, which is where the bottom pocket goes. I could just add more fondant over the top of that, but it would be so thick by the time I'd finished adding all the layers, so we'll cut that off. Okay, I'm pushing in some stitching lines lightly with my Dresden tool. This is the metal one that I'm using, just a bit sharper than the plastic one. And then we're going to cut a strip of, it's not quite white, I've dyed it slightly ivory fondant, a bit thinner than the gingerbread coloured one that I've got. So that's going to go around both zip areas of the bag, trimming off any extra that we don't need. I've just stuck these down with water, but of course you can use edible glue if you like. Now I'm just trying to add a bit of texture. Now I don't know if you guys can see this very well on the video, but because it's fabricy and I couldn't find a texture mat that had the right texture, so I'm just kind of scoring it in. And then we're going to want some more fondant to just go around the back of the bag, or not the back, but the bit that's closer to the back. I don't need to actually ice the back of this one because I don't plan on having it stood up. Okay, so a darker brown is needed now for the edge of the zipper area. And I've put a couple of lines in that, which we can put stitching details in later. Now, to get all these detailed areas, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use some greaseproof paper and kind of trace around them. It's going to make it slightly more accurate than if I just try and guess and draw them by hand. Okay, so now I can cut out those pieces that I have traced. Let's just check it against there. Yep, so I'll put a light indentation in where his nostrils are going to be. We'll put that to one side, we'll put that in a bit. I need some more little brown edge pieces, this time to go around like the pocket part. Let's make the little square. I think the square, oh, it's not quite a square, but the logo bit for the Loungefly bags is probably the hardest bit to get right because usually I just don't write anything in it because my handwriting's so bad. Okay, also we want a little drip pattern. So I'm going to use more of this ivory coloured fondant. I'm going to roll it as thin as I can and cut the drip effect. It's going to go on some of my gingerbread coloured fondant. I wish I had made the buttercream gingerbread flavour to match the look of the bag. Okay, so I think it's a slightly lighter colour on the front of the pocket and like the inside of the ears and things on this bag. I don't know if it really shows that I made it a lighter colour, but then it wasn't very obvious on the bag. Okay, so I'm going to texture some fondant and we're going to cut it into thin strips. Now I want to put this around the edge. So my bag has lots of detailing on that looks like stitching. And I want this to look a bit like stitching. So that's why I've put the little lines in going across it. And of course I can put more lines in when it's stuck in place as well. Let's get the eyes on, or the kind of area for the eyes. Again, we'll put more stitching detail in that white fondant around there. Just trimming it off where it comes next to the nose. And a couple of little pieces above the nose. And stitch his mouth. And I am just constantly looking at my bag for whereabouts these should be going. Now the ears. So I am using my fondant that I've got left over from the bag. However, I have added some CMC, or you can use Tylose to it because these need to dry pretty firm. Otherwise, they're just going to flop backwards. Put a thinner layer of that slightly lighter colour on there. And I'm just going to try and add a wooden skewer in there. So stick in, fold it over the ear and the stitching detail around the edge. Let's just add a bit more detail to that. And then we've got some little dots or spots, which I guess is like the speckly bit of gingerbread, so it doesn't look too kind of flat in colour. And I'm just using some greaseproof paper to try and lift them in areas so they don't dry completely flat. Now onto the bow. So we want a little strip with curved edges, a small strip for the middle. Just put in the outside edge lines where the stitching detail will go. So I tried to do the indentations and the stitching lines a bit like we did on the previous Loungefly bag, which you can find in the other video that I've got on here. So I tried to also pick a design of a bag that I thought would be fairly easy to replicate in cake. I mean, I did love this bag anyway, that's why I bought it. I thought it was one that wouldn't be too complicated to recreate in cake. Some of the Loungefly bags would be just too difficult for me to recreate in cake, especially because of the patterning and things on them. That bow looks fab. Okay, the zipper. I am going to put lots of little lines in and try and draw it by hand. Now, you can get moulds that do the zips for you. I do have a mould somewhere. I couldn't find it, although I'm pretty sure my mould is slightly too small compared to the zip on this thing anyway. I'm painting it with some gold edible colour. So these are food colours that I'm painting it with. Again, I'll put links below the video so you can see what I've used, guys. And that's just going to go on the bag. Okay, let's add our cheeks. I've just put a little mark on where I want them to go, and I'm using some red fondant, and I'm just going to squish it out till it reaches the size of that mark that I've made on there. You can use a circle cutter and cut the red cheeks out to that circle to begin with if you prefer. Again, couldn't find one to the right size. Although I could have used the other end of the piping nozzle, couldn't I, really? That would have made sense. Okay, so stitching details on. Again, any other bits that are on the bag, I just cut out in the same way. More dots. Just sticking that zip on in place. Okay, we're going to use the other end of the piping nozzle and just press in a little circle. We're going to paint the gold around the edges and also on those little circle dots. Now, the writing bit that I mentioned earlier, that is so difficult. I thought I'd attempt to write the word Disney, but the word Loungefly was just a little bit too small and too neat and tidy, and I can't draw or paint that neat, so I just decided to just go with the word Disney. Okay, so back to Stitch's eyes. Let's do sort of the more central bit. So he's starting to look a bit more like he should now. Get that Disney bit in place. I did have to wait for the gold to dry before I could push that on. Some white ovals in there. A second oval, but a bit smaller. More stitching details. I thought if I didn't add the stitching details, this would be the thing that would kind of be a bit of a giveaway that it wasn't the actual bag and that it was definitely cake. Okay, his bow tie on in place. You can see my bow tie is a little bit different to the one on the bag itself. So a darker brown for the nostrils. And then he's got like a slightly darker brown sort of stitching that goes underneath each eye. Again, we need those lines in so it looks more like stitching. Now it's slightly darker under the red of each cheek, but you couldn't tell on mine, to be honest. And then I'm going to pipe in some stitching details everywhere that I had that little indentation that I kind of drew. I maybe could have done with a smaller piping nozzle actually to get the stitching detail a little bit finer than I got it. It still looked nice, it just didn't quite look like the real bag. So once the ears are firmed up, we can stick them to the head. So I am going to push the skewer into the cake, so whoever's eating it needs to make sure they know that's there and they would remove it. I've also added some royal icing, so the same as what I was using for the stitching. And I'll just prop that up underneath till it dries. And then when it dries, I should hopefully be able to move everything from under and they should stay where they are. Okay, so some final details like the little sort of buttons. Normally I guess they would be gumdrops, wouldn't they, on a gingerbread man, but to make it more kind of Stitch themed, I guess they're kind of more like tropical flowers crossed with a sweet, or candy, I should say candy instead of sweet, shouldn't I? Okay, let's get this brown little, do you call it beading? I did fashion, I should know what things like this are called, and I really can't ever remember. Is it called beading when you get that around the edge of a cushion or a bag? And that bit, we're adding that bit to the bottom of the bag anyway. Okay, so we're nearly there. So I'm doing 2 pieces of red stuck together, and this is going to be the top handle for the bag. I will need to put some white lines on there so it looks a bit more kind of candy cane patterned. And I am going to mix the white powder, which is edible powder. I'm going to mix it with some glaze, edible glaze as well, guys. I don't have to mix it with the glaze, but often when I've painted on the powder, even if I've done it to like a liquid form, when it dries, when you touch it, the powder can still come off on your hands. So by mixing it with the glaze, it doesn't dry powdery and it won't come off on my hands if I touch it. The only thing is glaze is a bit of a nightmare to clean off your brushes. You do really need some glaze cleaner for it. Okay, so we're going to add some brown specks like for the gingerbread effect, finishing up with any white highlights, and let's get that little strap on, or the handle, onto the top. Just check those ears are on. Yes, okay, it's staying. So we need to remove the board, otherwise it doesn't look like a bag. So guys, can you tell? I mean, obviously I know which one. As long as you don't look too close and you're not watching this on a big screen, can you tell which one is the cake? Is the first one or the second one? There is actually a big giveaway as to which one is cake and which one isn't the cake. And it is, of course, this one. I never got round to adding the edge of the zipper, you know, the bit that you zip the zips up and down with. I don't know what you call that part of a zipper. I forgot to add it to the cake, and I think it's when you realise it's pretty obvious. Well, that and the fact that my stitching detail doesn't look like the stitching on the cake. Let's see if we can stand it up. I know I didn't make it to stand up, but... Okay, yeah, he stands up. I'm pretty pleased with that one. So even though it doesn't look exactly the same, I had a lot of fun making this one. I hope you enjoyed it too, guys. Let me know if you want to see any more Loungefly bags being made in videos. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos like this one. And if you want to learn from me with far more detailed projects, you can find some of my classes over on my website. And also there's my book that came out earlier this year if you're wanting to learn more on modelling figures and cake toppers. Great for Christmas present ideas, guys. So see you next time.